Hi, I want to welcome everyone. I'm Stephen Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. We are a nonprofit, good government research group and watchdog. And I want to, before we get too much further, thank our sponsor, B1 Bank, for making this webinar possible. We truly appreciate their efforts. We have our monthly webinar series. This is one of our most popular ones. We're going to do a review of the session where we have, basically trying to figure out what happened, trying to go in detail. We not be able to cover everything. And I think this is typically one of our most watched webinars. So I suspect there's going to be a lot of questions. For that, we have a fantastic panel who will be able to answer every one of your detailed questions. Absolutely no problems whatsoever. So we have House and Governmental Affairs Chairman Beaullieu, Senate Democratic Caucus Chairman Senator Gerald Boudreaux, and House Appropriations Chair Jack McFarland. Thank y'all so much for participating. I know that this has been, you know, uh, uh, all sessions are stressful, but this one seemed particularly challenging. So I really thank y'all for taking the time post-session to talk to us. Um, I'm going to start just on some format questions just to let everyone know. I'm going to ask one sort of overview question, and then to sort of get us warmed up. And then I'm going to turn it over to Melinda. She has a couple of questions. And then we're going to open it up for the audience so they can ask questions. They should start putting their questions in the Q&A as soon as possible. Almost all our webinars, we never have quite enough time to get through everything. I think this one in particular, we're probably going to have a ton of questions. So I'll just warn y'all, as soon as you can get it in, the better. So put it in the Q&A. This will be recorded and put on our YouTube channel for later. All right, let's start off. For everyone, um, from your perspective, can you name an outcome that you were pleased with from this legislative session? So something maybe like a bill that passed that you particularly like, and then what outcome disappointed you? So, and whether it's a bill that should have passed that didn't, or a bill that passed that you think shouldn't have. So I'll just go in the order to introduce y'all. Chairman Beaullieu.
Yep, thank you, and thank you for having us. We definitely appreciate the opportunity to speak with the people of the state and those folks who follow PAR. Y'all have a good group, and we appreciate what y'all do at the Capitol. One of the bills that I worked on was House Bill 977, which dealt with parental consent, and it relates to minors' use of applications on mobile devices. This is something that Representative Kim Carver worked on previous year. Representative Laurie Schlegel had worked on in years past, and it was a heavy lift. It was a new area of focus for me, making sure that our children are protected when they're online and using these applications. It's been a fight in the years past, and so I was happy to come in and work with all the sides to try and get that to a happy spot to be able to protect our youth. And so for me, that was probably the most fulfilling one of the session that I worked on. As a parent, my four children are a little bit older, but iPhones and all the technology was coming out as the kids were growing. And so the kids knew a lot more than I did. And so this kind of puts the parents in charge. I guess the thing that I was most disappointed about was the constitutional amendments failing on the ballot, and in particular, just the ones to give the teachers a pay raise and with regards to the taxes as well. But so that was a big setback for us, I think. But that happens, and we have to go back to the drawing board. But
No,
uh,
no,
but
no.
but thank you for
Completely
asking that
understandable.
questions. I figured I'd mention those.
Um, Senator Boudreaux, something that you saw as a positive outcome and something that you were maybe disappointed in.
Well, first of all, let me also add on the onset the appreciation for the invitation to join PAR and all of its outreach. I think it's very important that we get this non-political review of where things are. So it's my pleasure to be there. I think a couple of things on the Caleb Wilson Hazing Prevention Act. Following that tragic loss of this young man over a year ago, we were able to go back in and to put some more. We brought all the universities in. The bill was co-sponsored by a lot of us. It was led by Representative Vanessa LaFleur, and basically, what it did was put some more teeth into to hazing on college campuses. We keep talking about it, and here it is. We had another death So I think we made a lot of progress. It took a lot of silos down to get that done. Um, we were also able to work on additional cancer screenings for firemen. We know that line of fire, that line of work, they go into the fires, and years later, they suffer. So we were able to pass some legislation from that standpoint. The disappointment comes in the redistricting process where we went from 4-2 to a 5-1 map. As you said, all sessions are difficult. It's never easy to go and change. And I think the conversations and the influence of the national movement just to get seats led to a lot of animosity here in Louisiana as to what is fair, what is equitable, and how do we represent that. So that the outcome, of course, changed the congressional makeup for the state at this point. So that was disappointing. And then I'll stop by unfortunately, Senate Bill 125 for wrongly convicted individuals in the state received 98 votes in unanimous in the House and 36 votes in unanimous in the Senate without any negative. And while it made it through the legislative process without any opposition, it was the first one up that has gotten vetoed. So for wrongly convicted people, and where we stand on a national level, how we treat those who are wrongly convicted will remain the way it is now. So that would be another big disappointment that while the legislature had no opposition, it did not get the governor's signature, so it does not become law.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator. Representative McFarland, tell us about the highs and lows as you see it.
Well, I mean, for me individually, I had a bill that was a clinical research bill. Didn't get a lot of attention unless you were a research center or a hospital, but it does play a significant role in creating an opportunity for us to expand. One of the things that Louisiana has done really well is research, and I don't think it gets enough attention. If you look at our med schools, we have actually two of the leading med schools in the country between LSU, Shreveport, and New Orleans, and then we also have Tulane. And if you look at the opportunities we have as it relates to research, clinical research, and when I say clinical research, I want to go even further, phase one, which is our human trials, and partnering that with LED. There are tremendous opportunities within the pharmaceuticals and other opportunities to expand that. And we've made significant investments through the appropriations process and capital outlay the last few years in expanding those research facilities, both in Shreveport and in New Orleans. So I was glad that legislation took a lot of work working with all the stakeholders, but I think this year was really our first step forward. The disappointment is I'm going to share with Chairman Beaullieu. There is extreme disappointment that the amendments failed. I do think the amendments got caught up in some of the outside political issues with the congressional redistricting and the controversy there. And it's unfortunate because now we're back to square one with trying to figure out how we're going to do permanent teacher pay raises and, stop doing the stipends. And it just created another issue. That in itself was not just enough. Then we have a deficit at REC in May the 8th when they met. That just created another challenge for us. And having a deficit at the end of the year is not something we've had over the last, I guess, 7 years now. So, I think it's reflective of the tax reform changes we've made. And we anticipated that there would be changes. We just didn't know how they would affect us. And this is the first year that we've seen the impacts of that. And I think it'll come back around next year, but we'll be paying closer attention.
All right. Now, I think we'll probably get a few questions from multiple people on the teacher pay and redistricting and things like that. So I'm going to pass it over to Melinda. So now y'all get the hard questions. I was a softball. So Melinda, why don't you start us off?
Thank you. Just a reminder to everybody, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A early, please, because they're going to pile up pretty quickly. So Representative McFarland, you brought up the downgraded forecast, and I kind of want to revisit that because the budget debate kind of had a wrench thrown in it because the REC downgraded that forecast and it was sort of in the middle of the process. So how did the House and Senate work together to decide where to make the reductions to match the new revenue forecast? And how did y'all decide what to prioritize? Because I know the leadership of both chambers worked closely on the budget process, even though it was already in the Senate.
Yeah, so I think that over the last 3 years, and that including this year, we've done a good job of the Speaker and the Senate President and the Chairman of Finance, Glenn Womack, and myself sitting down together, communicating well, having a plan from when we receive the executive budget to how it's going to be approached in the House as we send it to the Senate. Obviously, the wrench you spoke of was the REC's reduction in revenue, specifically the 104 million in next year's money. We did address that shortfall by reducing the Gator funding that was in the executive budget. We also utilized the 31 million we had put in operational cost for school systems. And then the other 29 or so million were utilized through means of finance swaps. Those were the easy ones to do. But then in the current year, already having received the supplemental $293 million, and then having to go back and reduce it by 117. I think it put the Senate in a very awkward position because, those are dollars that we had already utilized and had already funded into various agencies. So I do appreciate Glenn Womack and the Senate President as well, because the communication never ended. I mean, we worked through it. There were tough decisions made, and not all were popular, but I mean, this is, it's just part of the political process.
Senator Boudreaux, you were on Senate Finance, obviously. Can you talk through, once again, the Senate was the place where y'all decided not to fund the increase in the LA Gator program that the governor requested. Can you talk through sort of what the reasoning was there and maybe more broadly, how you think the negotiations went with the House this year on budget issues?
I think Chairman McFarland hit it that there was ongoing dialogue and communication, and I think that's always the key if you're going to have a successful outcome. Specifically with the Gator expansion, this has pretty much been a 2-year conversation on where that is going to go. While there's a whole lot of support out there for it, I know Senate Finance and I think across the board with many members in the Senate. We've seen in other states how this has gotten out of hand financially and not being able to wrap around. So the 2-year process of conversation with Superintendent Brumley is to make sure before we expand, number one, that we take care of every one of those that are in the former program known as the voucher program, and that we don't lose any of those or they don't fall through the cracks. And then secondly, how do we expand it and still have fiscal responsibility and accountability when it comes to those dollars, and it doesn't end up where we're now tripling the size that's needed in the budget. So there has been some movement in that area. There's been a lot of discussion as it relates to the guardrails that need to be up to ensure that. And we'll, as I said, it's been 2 years. I think next year we could get to that point where we can look at how we incorporate that, because every one of us have those schools who are looking to expand the Gator program within their respective districts. I'm talking about legislators. So finance has continued to pump the brakes until there is a level of confidence that we can sustain this program even through its growth.
Okay, Representative Beaullieu, you handled or got stuck with, depending on the perspective, one of the highest profile issues of the session, which was the redrawing of the 6 U.S. House districts after the Supreme Court ruled the previous map was unconstitutional. So can you talk through how the court ruling, which came at the end of April, changed the tone of the session, and how did the House and Senate decide sort of which chamber was going to take the lead and how the bill would be handled?
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously it was a very hot topic towards the end of the session. It wasn't a topic at the beginning of the session because the Supreme Court hadn't released its ruling. We'd come in December or November, I guess, in that special session to try and push the dates back to try and hopefully that we were hoping the Supreme Court would give us a response back in December, and that didn't happen. They gave it to us at the last minute while we're smack dab in the middle of session. And essentially what they said is that they looked at the map that we had passed a couple of years ago as a racial gerrymander, and said that we couldn't use race as a predominant factor. But one of the two key things that they had said in their ruling is that Louisiana should not have redrawn the map that we had done in 2022 because it did not constitute a racial gerrymander then. And the other thing that it said is with regards to partisanship and redistricting, that you can treat partisanship as any other factor, race neutral factor, to allow you to draw lines based on partisanship. And you see that going on in other states already, where they can draw Republicans out or draw Democrats out, where they don't have the racial makeup of Louisiana. And so it had a big impact on us, and we were the maps were deemed unconstitutional, so we had to redraw them. And then from the process, I know speaking with our speaker Philip de Beaullieu, we thought it was best that the map started on the Senate side. I know we have a senator on here right now, but a lot of times the House takes some really tough votes. It gets to the Senate, gets changed a lot to what the Senate wants, and comes back to us not looking anything like it. So we felt that if it started in the Senate, we'd have a good idea of where the Senate was situated with regards to what the maps would look like. We would put our touches on it, and then hopefully send it back to them for concurrence without having the bill go to conference, which is what we were really trying to avoid. And it worked that way. Senator Morris had a bill on the calendar that was germane to it. He had a congressional redistricting bill that he had set on the calendar just in case Calais would come back, and so he used that as the instrument. And when it got to us, there were some things that we didn't like the Senate version that we didn't like on the House, and we had some members that were not happy with their version. A couple of them in particular, Grant Parish was split, Caucus Parish was split, Terrebonne Parish was split. Some of where the parish, St. Landry Parish was in three. And so we, out of the House committee, we passed it and addressed a lot of that. And again, the Senate pushed back on the version that came out the House. And we found a happy medium in the map that you saw that we passed. And ultimately, we feel that it's gonna meet constitutional muster based on the Calais case and everything that we're reading. And even as late as 2 days ago, with the Supreme Court coming back on the Alabama redistricting case, saying that they could proceed with their 6 Republican, 1 Democrat map that they had done, kind of gives us a good feeling that they're gonna, any kind of challenges, we should overcome those. But I don't want to ever kind of predict what the court's going to do, because one thing I've learned, I'm not an attorney. I handle 401k plans for a living, so I'm not a legal guy. But one thing I've noticed, not to try and predict what a court or a bunch of judges is gonna rule on, because they'll make you a fool real quick. So we'll sit and wait and see what the pleasure of the court is. I know right now the Calais plaintiffs have made a claim that the map that we passed is another racial gerrymander, that it shouldn't be even the 5 Republican, 1 Democrat. The 1 Democrat they're saying is based on race, And so they have a challenge in the Western District. And so they have some legal proceedings going on which is way above my pay grade. But I believe that those rulings will be on the 16th and 17th of this month. So we should know the result of that fairly soon and how we're going to be proceeding.
Okay. Senator
Miss
Boudreaux,
Melinda,
yeah,
yeah, go
I was
ahead.
going to come to you about that exact question. So,
Yeah. Let me yeah, it's a difficult process anytime you have to go through these, regardless of if you're in the majority or the minority. One of the things that it's been heavily debated, hours and hours of debate on the Senate side as well as the House side. And no it's no surprise that, if it doesn't go your way, you're definitely not going to be pleased with the outcome. And, if the tables would turn, and that's what's happened in the past, we did it. One of the things I just want to add so that we can give more people time to ask questions is I was just so pleased that people from all over the state took time out of their schedules. They put pause on their life to come. We were there till 4:30 in the morning on the Senate side. Chairman Beaullieu started at 9 o'clock in the morning and went late into the evening on that, where people had an opportunity to come and express their First Amendment rights, to inform us as to what they feel is there. And it wasn't just Democrats, it wasn't just Republicans or independent, it was everybody who came out. And I think that's what the process is supposed to be about. And as legislators, we have to listen to what the people are saying, and then take into consideration before we make those decisions. And elections have consequences, and when you're in the majority, you do get to exercise the votes when you have them. But I just wanted to acknowledge the presence of so many people with the Capitol under construction, with a lot of moving parts. Weather wasn't really good. People came out, and that's what democracy is supposed to be about. A voice of the people. So, like I said, we've debated it for hours and hours and hours. Now it's going to be in the hands of the courts to decide, is it fair? Is it equal representation? Will it pass the muster? And like Chairman Beaulieu, I'm a retiree. I don't have any legal experience at all, and I would, fail to predict. Just hope that the courts would look at it in the same light that they have looked at so many other things in previous years, and give it its due diligence.
okay. Not shockingly, we have several budget-related questions for the Appropriations Chairman here.
We'll put my
So
glasses back on.
So I'm gonna start with one we got fairly early on, talking about while spending in the operating budget has largely remained flat, some of the other budgets have been growing in recent years, whether that's the capital outlay budget, the legislative budget, and the judicial budget. So can you talk through, Representative McFarland, what those increases, what's driving those increases in those budgets, and whether the governor has expressed any concern about reining in those spending increases, because he's talked about trying to keep standstill budgets across agencies.
Okay, so Melinda, when you say the judicial budget, I'm assuming you're meaning the judicial bill that we passed. In that budget, if you'll go back and look, there was a $5 million increase in FINS, Families in Needs of Service. That was one of the largest increases we've had in years to it. The judges' pay raises, obviously, I mean, that's nearly $10 million that you add to that. And then they've had a significant increase in their information and technology. Their systems were antiquated and jeopardized, or in jeopardy of being more than antiquated. And then there was some security issues for them where unfortunately, we live in a society that now politics and other things have led to people reacting in less than acceptable and reasonable ways. And so, yes, the judicial budget has increased significantly in the last few years. I don't think it's increased that much. There were changes. If you want to refer to clerks and reporters in the Orleans area and reductions made. There's been a significant challenge through the years as long as I've been on appropriations for 11 years. That has come into question many times why we were only funding Orleans clerks and minute reporters and not funding anyone else's. And obviously, when that began, the politics at that time, that was the largest heavily populated central area in the state. That's shifted now toward Baton Rouge. And should we be spending more of those resources that were going to New Orleans for those type things? Should we shift them to Baton Rouge? The legislative budget, look, we continue to have the same responsibilities that we've always had. Um, we are responsible for part of the building. I mean, you see a significant amount of work going on there now. I mean, it's going to be under construction for the next several years. That carries a tremendous cost. If we did get in a disagreement with the governor and he decided to veto the legislative budget, we have to maintain a balance that would allow us to continue to operate the Capitol, pay our staffs. There's hundreds of employees that work within the Capitol, and we have significant retirement debt and things that we're obligated to cover. So we have to maintain a healthy balance there. And then what was the other agency?
Yeah, the other one was capital outlay, which is not really your area as much as it is Representative Bacala, but
Yeah, but look, capital outlay, we've done I mean, other than the P5s that grew a lot, which P5s, there's everyone's aware of. I mean, there's no guarantee on those. It just puts them in line where they could potentially receive funding. But I can speak for what I know Chairman Bacala's goal was this session was to continue to maintain a stable position there in capital outlay where we weren't increasing our obligations. We weren't going over our bond, increasing our bond indebtedness to a point where it was not sustainable. I think he did a good job of working because look, think about it. This was his first year as chairman of Ways and Means. He did a very good job of controlling that and working with the administration. And then as the bill was passed on, HB2 was passed over to the Senate. I mean, he continued to work with Chairman Fole.
okay. We have several questions about amendments. Not surprisingly, particularly the teacher pay amendment failing. But we also have sort of a broad question, which is after the last two rounds of constitutional amendments have been rejected across the board, why do y'all keep sending constitutional amendments to the voters to decide when it has seemed as though they have been resistant to passing constitutional amendments lately? So Representative Beaullieu, I'm going to start with you, and then Senator Boudreaux, I'm going to ask you as well.
Yeah, good, because we had a little pre-discussion, and I didn't know that was going to come up. But the last time I was on PAR's webinar was to discuss constitutional convention, and the difficulty is we have so much locked up in our Constitution, which is my age. I just turned 51. Our Constitution's turning 51. That when we have voters that are and constituents asking us to do things, a lot of times we have to go into the Constitution to try and solve those problems. When we are, and this is kind of getting a little bit into Jack's area, Chairman McFarland's area as well. When we're trying to balance a budget, we're trying to get taxes lower, be competitive with other states. And I'm going to use the teacher pay raise one as an example. And we're trying not to increase the overall expenses of the state on a reoccurring basis. We were trying to solve everybody's request with that one amendment, not increasing reoccurring spending, not having to increase taxes, and getting the teachers a pay raise. The only way we could have done that is by going to the Constitution and unlocking some of those protected funds that to pay off those $2 billion in debt. So if we have constituents that bring us items that don't require us to go into the Constitution, we won't. But a lot of times what happens is because our Constitution has grown so much and we have so many specific items that are sitting in that Constitution, it makes it tough to not have to go into it. I would prefer, and this is why I was a big proponent of the Constitution and Convention, is a very narrow version of our Constitution to have everything in statute to where we didn't have to go back to the voters and we can handle it all in the legislature. But we haven't been able to get that convention going, and so it forces us to have to go back to the voters each time. And it is disappointing to see the amendments fail. But look, I'm a voter as well, and I understand the voters' fatigue and frustration with it as well. So until we have another constitution, we're probably going to have to keep trying to pass amendments to fix these items. So.
Senator Boudreaux, the legislature will have sent 10 amendments to be on the November ballot for people. What are you hearing from voters in your district when these things are failing in the last couple rounds? Did you not know that number, Representative Beaullieu? It's 10 on the November ballot.
I did not, but it doesn't surprise me.
Just
Yeah.
try again is what I'm hearing.
And
That's
I can
just
predict
good for y'all.
I can predict what Chairman Boudreaux is going to say, but y'all go ahead.
Well, so in my 11th year in the Senate, I'm proud to say I have not authored a constitutional amendment, and I will make a commitment on this PAR webinar today that in my last 18 months, with the Lord willing, I will not do one. I think and Chairman Beaulieu was right. There are some things that's the only place you can go, but again, not being an attorney. When you do get these constitutional amendments, it's very confusing. The language is something that lay people just do not understand. And it's no way that in the number of words that are allowed on the ballot that you can explain it. And then when you get into the politics of it and you hear this group promoting this constitutional amendment, you continue to lose the trust of the public. While I respect the fact that there are some things that need to be changed, I think we need to hit the reset button and just stop with constitutional amendments for a few years and let people get a better understanding of what's going on. What I hear is that if there's a constitutional amendment on, it's easier to vote no than to try to understand what's in it. So I think that has been the problem. And that's why, we have not been successful in passing these. Lay people just don't understand the details, and you cannot put it on the ballot for people to understand. And those who do promote it, you're either for them or you're against them. So it's a lot of moving parts, but my commitment is that I will not try to sell any constitutional amendments in my last 18 months in the Senate.
This is the moment where I'm going to say PAR will have a handy guide out ahead of the November election to try and explain all 10 amendments to people.
Melinda loves that we have so many amendments. It keeps her busy.
Yeah, and look, you all do that. And in fact, when our full transparency, when they come out, your report, the PAR report, is what I circulate. You could go to my website, I post it because
Thank you.
a lot of it I don't understand. So some I'm for, some I'm against, but I just try to give the information to the people, and what I'm hearing from the people, no amendments.
Representative McFarland, I'll switch and not make you talk about amendments too, but we do have several questions about teacher pay, obviously, with the failure of Amendment 3. We have somebody saying that they think the failure, at least in part, had to do with the funding mechanism y'all had chosen for the teacher pay raise. What is the plan going forward now? We have someone asking, how are y'all going to come up with money for a long-term teacher pay? I know the governor has a plan. Can you sort of walk us through what the plan entails?
Well, I'll do my best, Melinda, with the knowledge that I have to date. So obviously, I did like the funding mechanism we were using in the amendment. I think that is a responsible move when you take savings and pay off debt and create opportunities for reoccurring revenue that now you didn't have before. The interest we were making off of that savings was only 50 to 60 million a year. It's a lot easier for the state or for me to budget 50, 60 million back to the locals that were being utilized for 8F, 8G programs and things such as that than it is to come up with 200 million, which I'm being tasked with to come up for a teacher stipend or permanent pay raise. So I did like that. Now that's done. So with what we have proposed now, obviously everyone watched the governor's conference or press conference, and he has a proposal now that we will be tasked with voting on, and that is utilizing MFP dollars that exceed over 4 billion this year. 30% of the MFP that we send to the to the school boards is used for non-instructional classroom expenditures. So, I mean, it could be food services, it could be buses, fuel, a list of things. Now, what's got everyone's attention, and when you go to the treasurer's website, 2 years ago, Senator Rick Edmonds passed a piece of legislation, and it gave what we call like the Louisiana checkbook. It opened up the checkbook. So now you can see what all the school boards spend their money on. And when you look at some of the spending, and there is some egregious spending, but I do believe it is isolated. I don't believe it's every school district that is spent egregiously like that. I do think there are issues that we need to address in how those dollars are spent. There needs to be more strict guidelines on what it can be used for. But I'm also concerned because I look in the last 2 days, and look, even before I got on here, I was hearing I talked to 3 more school boards, one of which I represent, 2 I don't, but they have significant concerns. And I'll give you an example. In Natchitoches Parish, they closed 5 schools in the last 2 years, reduced 91 teachers. This is happening in a lot of districts. So it makes it challenging when we talk about the MFP. And I appreciate the fact that the Senate President and the Speaker have an SCR that is going to have us digging into the MFP and understanding this formula. Because right now, there's only one person I know that understands it, and that's Beth in the Department of Education. I mean, I've been there 11 years and I still don't understand it. So I think it's time. I think it's time that we sit down and look at it. Do I think over a long period of time, we could probably find $165 million within the 4.6 billion? Yeah, because for like one of my school districts, they don't utilize high dosage tutoring at all. None of those dollars are utilized, and there's $35 million going to high dosage tutoring. Well, my district's not utilizing those dollars, so maybe that's dollars that could go toward it. Differential pay. My school district is not utilizing differential pay. I have 1 school out of 4, 1 parish out of 4. So it's so complex, though, Melinda. I think it is a conversation that I think with the SCR Speaker DeVilliers and Senate President Cameron put out, we are going to look at. Do I know how all of this is going to work? No, I'm just getting parts of the ingredients, and it's like everything else. We will have to put it together.
So in the immediate short term, the governor wants to take 168 million from a different part of the public school funding formula and essentially use it to cover the teacher stipends and the school support worker stipends that they've been receiving for the last 3 years. But that takes a 2/3 vote of the legislature. So Senator Boudreaux, I'm going to ask, have you settled on where you are on that vote when it comes time to make it?
No, we've gotten, and Chairman McFarland has shed some light on it. I think there's still some more conversations that need to be had because, as he indicated, we're all getting calls from our school districts to find out what is going to be the impact, where is it coming from. And while he talked about the ingredients, we haven't put them in the bowl yet and started stirring them. And so the answer to your question is no, not until we get more details before a ballot comes out as to what is going to be impacted. I can't give you an answer at this point. I am very supportive of continuing the stipend for our teachers. I was in favor of the teacher pay raise. So I want to make it clear that I'm for it, but by the same token, I don't want transportation or the cafeteria workers or the food services or the maintenance people coming to me after I make a vote that you just took away those funds, so we're not going to be able to do this or that. So I think, before we are asked to vote on something, we will be presented with a lot more details. The public will be made aware of where that's coming from, and we're going to do it in the right light so that there are no unintended consequences. And until we get to that point, I'm not sure that anyone is against any teacher pay raise or against any. It's just the mechanism on how we're going to get it done. And I'm going to serve on that MFP task force that Chairman McFarland alluded to. And given time, we'll be able to do this the right way. So my answer to your question is at this point, until we get all of the details, I cannot honestly give you a yes or a no on this procedure. But I am for it, and I am committed to finding a way for us to compensate our teachers and support staff moving forward.
Okay. Representative Beaullieu, I have a couple questions coming your way there because they're in your wheelhouse of your committee. This one might be a simple one. Someone is asking, is there any political support for a constitutional convention?
In the House, there is, in the House of Representatives, there is. And the Senate, it has gotten kind of moderately warm reception. So I don't think right now there is. We bring it back each year to try and restart the conversation, but at this point, I do not believe there is appetite for a convention. And to Senator Boudreaux's comments earlier about folks voting no on all the amendments, if we can't get them to vote yes on some of the amendments, at the end of a constitutional convention, the voters have to accept or reject the new constitution. So if we had one on the table today, I'm not confident that the voters would accept the new constitution, even if all of us panelists thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. I think we would need to maybe hit the pause button on that one as well and revisit it. But I think it's needed. I desperately think it's needed.
Okay, we also have several questions dealing with no party voters and closed party primaries. So I'm going to try and tackle a couple of those. And I guess just broadly ask you, there was a bill moving through the process that was going to let the Republican and Democratic parties choose whether no party voters can participate in their closed party primaries.
I recall yep, I can touch on that. So
and the Senate stopped that bill, so that stalled in the Senate. But can you talk through sort of what that is about, but also if you think that disenfranchises no party voters, because that's the theme of a lot of these questions.
Yeah, so there's some politics behind that one, and I'll explain the politics behind it too. Essentially, when we went to a closed party primary system, we allowed no party folks, when they go to vote, to make a decision whether they wanted to vote in the Republican closed primary or the Democrat closed primary, so that they would not be what everyone said, would use the word like you just used, disenfranchised, so they could have an option to participate in the closed party primary system. Both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party frowned upon that because they said, look, if you wanted to vote and you want to vote in our Democrat primary, you want to vote in our Republican primary, you need to be a member of our party. We don't want folks who don't agree with us, who don't agree with us enough to not be in our party, to be selecting our candidates that we send to the general election. And so that was the essential part of that bill, was to allow the Republican and Democrat parties to decide whether or not that they would accept no party candidates in their election. It didn't mandate that they had to or that they couldn't. It put it in the hands of both of the parties. So that's what the bill did, and it didn't make it out the Senate. And the political side, and I'm assuming this, why it didn't make it out the Senate, when we went to the closed party primary system, when that bill was going through the process, Chairwoman Emerson was carrying that bill. Part of the negotiations on the Senate side to get the bill passed originally was to allow no party folks to be able to participate in the closed party primary system. Had we not done that, I don't believe the original bill that set up the closed party primary system would have passed. So that was a negotiation 2 years ago when we went to the closed system. And so I think what the Senate was saying, and again, I'm not a senator and I don't want to quote them, but I can only assume they're saying, hey, look, this was how we allowed it to get out the Senate last time. And so we're sticking with our gun. So I would assume that the Republican and Democrat parties are not happy with it, but that's the politics behind it, and more than likely why it didn't get out of the Senate. And Senator Boudreaux may be able to correct me on that if I'm not accurate.
That was
I
where
think
it's going next.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. And that was the sentiments and to go back to your term again, disenfranchising a certain group of voters in the state, something that we don't want to do. So no, that was the history of it. And I agree with you. I don't think it would have gotten out had that agreement not been made. And then moving forward, I think there's going to be a whole lot of discussion as to when we decided to go to the closed party primary system, while it passed, there was still a lot of opposition throughout the state. Secretary of State Landry and her staff had to go through a whole lot of changes, still going through changes. And I think, before next session rolls around, there's going to be a whole lot of conversation as to do we go back to where we were? That there was some downside to that. There was a lot of confusion. There were a lot of people who, at the same time, they purged people off of the rolls because they hadn't been active voters, which had nothing to do with the closed party primary system, but it was all rolled into the same deal. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of conversation, and I think there's going to be some support to go back to the open primary system and the jungle system, and we take it from there. But no, I think the closed system with unintentional consequences, if you don't allow no party people an opportunity to do what they want, we are disenfranchising them.
Okay, Representative McFarland, of course, we have some more money questions for you. People are asking about the high dosage tutoring money that appears to have been reduced by about $6 million, and then also the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education request for an increase in operational funding for the school districts. That money was also removed from the budget eventually. Can you talk through what happened in those two areas on education?
So, as I appreciate it, with the high dosage tutoring, at the end of session, that reduction of 6 million was done. But I mean, as I appreciate it, there's a means of finance swap available because of some the high dosage tutoring as it relates to math. There were some math dollars that were going to be available to replace that 6 million. That's my appreciation. What was the second part, Melinda? I'm sorry.
The other one was about the operational increase
Oh, yes. So
to the funding formula.
Yeah, so on the House side, we've been approached by the School Superintendents Association, David Claxton, Executive Director, and others, and they had demonstrated there had not been a change in the operational cost in nearly a decade. And we were agreeable that there needed to be an operational increase, and we put $31 million in. Felt comfortable. Unfortunately, the REC reduction in forecast, that operational cost 31 million fell in line with that new funding for Gator, and those were new dollars being spent, so they were easy targets to solve the deficit. So that's why it was reduced.
Okay. This is a question I'm not sure who is best equipped to answer. And if none of you are that familiar, just let me know. But somebody is asking if somebody can talk through what changes were made to the Workers' Compensation Act. Is that anything anybody is terribly familiar with? Getting blank stares. So I think we're going to say no. Okay.
It's an accurate word. You say everybody's terribly familiar with it. I think that's a very accurate word. Yeah. Senator Miles put a lot of time into that. And I know there was some amendments placed on it, but the details of it, I could not help on. I would like to go back to the funding thing and to Chairman McFarland, we were able in higher ed to put $56 million, for outcome-based funding, along with millions of dollars, that were put into the budget, direct funds to campuses and operations and facilities. And I don't want to lose sight of that on top of the maintenance and the whole 9 yards. Senate Bill 484 dealt with fiscal health on college campuses. And I was concerned because our university in University of Louisiana Lafayette has gone through some financial problems this last year and a half, but they're not the only ones. UNO went through it before it. Monroe did. I mean, it's Southeastern, Nichols, all of them, going back before COVID went through some. So we put an amendment on there on Senate Bill 484 that changed under the fiscal health and accountability component. It just provided greater, I guess, transparency into the health of of all of our colleges and universities. And I just wanted to put that out because there was no teeth in it, and we keep seeing whether Chairman McFarland or Senator Womack keep seeing requests every year for more and more dollars. But what we're going to do is it's going to be outcome-based funding in addition to what they receive directly. But there are some reporting standards that I authored an amendment that will come under Board of Regents that we will see. What are you doing with these dollars? How are you spending them? Where they're going? And we find out before it gets put in the newspaper that one of our universities is in financial trouble and can't get out. So just wanted to bring that up for Senate Bill 484 and that amendment that's going to really, I think, change the way we do business in higher ed on these college campuses, whether it's athletics or whether it's in the academic sphere.
Okay. We have a question about the aerospace industry bills. There were a whole slew of bills that were aimed at trying to draw the industry to Louisiana, whether it's through some tax exemption availability. There was also a public records exemption bill. But then there was one that was a limitation of liability for certain things related to the industry. So we have somebody asking about whether there were any concerns about this approach, considering there are some growing issues in Texas about the similar set of circumstances with this industry, and I guess some concerns about the liability limitations going pretty far over there. So Representative McFarland, I'm going to start with you because I believe you sponsored at least one or two bills in this package.
Yes, and I did carry the limited liability one as well. So, look, obviously, we want to be competitive in economic development and to put Louisiana in a position to have the opportunity to land aerospace. I mean, we've talked about MISHO, but I think it hasn't been highlighted enough how significant of a role MISHO facility plant in New Orleans has played in the aerospace industry. And we have an opportunity to expand upon that. To be competitive with Florida and Texas, there were changes that we needed to make to compete with them. And what we did was we basically met the same legal legalities that they have applied in their laws. As it relates to some of the issues that I've even heard about that Texas has had, that's a little bit different. It is remote in Texas, not near as remote as I believe the one in Louisiana has the potential to be. And obviously, there's been a lot of public conversation about location and things like that. Even in the legislation, there was an amendment added on the Senate floor that there had to be 20,000 contiguous acres for that limited liability to apply, but it does not apply to any falling debris beyond that 20,000 acres. So, I mean, there was some changes made in the Senate to that, but I do think that for us to compete, to have an opportunity, because this is not a done deal, but to compete, to have an opportunity to land one of the aerospace industries in Louisiana, we put ourselves in that position.
Senator Boudreaux and Representative Beaulieu, do either one of you want to weigh in on this particular topic?
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of comment. I'm not on the liability side, but on the tax side of it, I guess, because we have a property tax exemption, I believe, or on some of the equipment and whatnot. And I grew up in South Louisiana, big oil and gas. The booms and busts of the oil and gas industry were part of all of our lives if you lived in South Louisiana. And one of the things that we talked about all those years was, why don't we have a more diversified economy in Louisiana? We was the state, not just families, but the state itself is so dependent on the oil and gas economy, and we're still very dependent on it. But we've been able to diversify our industries substantially compared to the 1980s. And going into whether it's the data centers that you see, or the aerospace industry, the health and the science fields the research, medical research fields that we talked about earlier, that all provides us an opportunity to broaden our base of revenue and broaden our base of jobs and opportunity in the state. So we don't have in this particular situation, the industry that is, or the environment that's extremely attractive from a tax standpoint to the aerospace industry. And so to use some advantages, some tax advantages to try and attract them, I think is a reasonable and a responsible way to do it. Those jobs don't exist now, that they haven't bought that equipment yet now. So this is not going to cost us anything in today's dollars. It's a future investment, and it'll be creating jobs and other forms of tax revenue for the state. And I think by bringing them in, and other companies that are in that space, will further diversify our economy and do good things for Louisiana. And I think you're seeing that all over the state. All of these big wins have not been in one location. They've been all over.
Senator Boudreaux, do you want to weigh in on the aerospace industry?
No, just the comment on diversification, and I think Chairman Beaulieu hit it, is that we've tasked LED with making sure that it's when they look at this, a comprehensive approach to spread this out throughout the state, and especially in those areas that need the diversification. So I'd second the motion that where and when we can do these, we gotta get into the game.
Stephen?
All righty. One last question. Let me get a relatively simple one on y'all. We have a lot of questions left too, and I want to thank everyone that put questions in there. High level, there was one question that didn't get answered in terms of special sessions, and apparently there's some rumors going around there might be a special session. Your take, and what have y'all heard on whether or not there might be a special session? We'll start. Chairman Beaulieu.
Yeah, so I thought you were going to say the last question is you hadn't touched on a new alligator harvesting, recreational alligator season. I thought that was going to be the final question. So when I left the Capitol yesterday, my last conversation with Speaker de Villiers was that he was not anticipating any special session. So, a lot of times things come up and we do have them, but if there is one, it's not on the horizon that I'm familiar with or that I'm aware of.
Representative McFarland, you hearing the same thing from the speaker?
Yeah, the speaker hasn't mentioned that to me about a possible special session. Obviously, you always hear those rumors and they circulate. And look, I think it was Representative Hilford who brought it to my attention. In the 11 years that she and I have served together, we've had 33 sessions. It's a record. No one has ever done that. I don't think it will be broken. So what's one more if we did have one?
Maybe y'all have a special sessions about special sessions. I'll just throw that out there. Senator Boudreaux, you're going to have the last word.
Look, I'll check my computer every day. If we get called back, I sign up for this. I'll be there. I think, the only really serious item that we have not addressed is teacher pay. And if it requires a special session to do it, I'll be here. Like I know my colleagues that are on the call today. So I also agree with Jack. 33, 34, 35, who's counting?
I really want to thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all taking the time. I know that y'all got to be worn out and you still got work to do. So come and speak to Par and the people that listen. Like I said, this will be on YouTube. And so other people that want to catch up or share it with your friends, please do so. Once again, thank y'all so much. I appreciate not just the information that y'all did it in such a respectful and really modeled great behavior, which we appreciate here at Par. Thank y'all.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thank
y'all.
you.
God bless.
Thank you.